It all starts with Clara Chambers, the Countess of Duxbury. Now, Clara's had 3 husbands, and let me tell you, none of them died peacefully in their beds of old age. But we'll get to that. One Tuesday morning, a muddy little boot shows up on Clara's doorstep. A street boy brings it, says a lady threw it from an asylum wagon. Clara takes one look at those careful embroidered stitches and knows exactly who sent it. Eleanor Clark, one of her book club ladies, has been dragged off to Leavenhall Lunatic Asylum. Now, Clara wasn't born a countess. She started as Clara Morrison, 18, and madly in love with Elias, who owned a bookshop. Her parents had other ideas. They wanted her married to Viscount Morset, a gambler with a nasty temper. Clara tried to run away to Dover and got caught. By then, she was pregnant with Elias's baby, though nobody knew that yet. It gets even more interesting. Clara's best friend, Alice Hartwell, promised to help her. Instead, Alice went straight to Elias and told him Clara was chasing rich men and just using him for practice. The man believed every word and left town that very day. Poor Clara had to marry Morset while carrying another man's child. Baby George was born with his real father's dark eyes, and Clara loved that boy more than life itself. Morset was exactly the sort of husband you'd expect. He gambled away money, drank when he lost, and took his frustrations out on Clara with his fists. She put up with it for George's sake. Years later, Alice visited. She'd married well and become Lady Meddleson by then. After too much wine, she let slip what she'd done to Elias. Morset heard every word and realized George wasn't his son. The man went completely mad, locked Clara in her room for a week, and burned all her books. When she got out, poor little George was terrified of his own shadow. Morset died that winter, thrown from his horse while drunk. Good riddance, you might think, but Clara's troubles were far from over. She married again for George's protection. Silas, the Earl of Esterly, seemed kind enough at first. He wasn't. Silas saw George as an inconvenience and treated the boy terribly, called Clara hysterical when she tried to protect her son. The night George died, Silas had locked the child outside during a storm for some minor offense. Clara found him the next morning, dead under an oak tree. Something in Clara broke that night. Something that never got fixed. Silas died 2 years later of heart failure. Clara inherited everything and went looking for Elias at his old bookshop. She found him there, dying of consumption after losing his wife and daughter to cholera. Clara nursed him through his final year. Before he died, Elias told her to help other women who had nowhere to turn. Clara took his words to heart. Clara decided to start what looked like an ordinary ladies' book club. Tea parties, she told society, just discussing novels like proper ladies should. But Clara had learned to spot women in trouble. She collected them carefully. First came Eleanor Clark. Now, Eleanor looked like she had everything. Beautiful house, wealthy husband Cecil, a young son named William. But Clara noticed things. The way Eleanor flinched when doors slammed, how she wore powder a bit too thick over certain spots on her face, the nervous way she glanced at the clock, always worried about getting home on time. Eleanor's husband Cecil was one of those men who needed to control everything. He decided what she read, where she went, who she spoke to. Eleanor lived in fear of his temper and desperately wanted to escape when he left for a business trip to Peru. Then there was Rose Wharton, an American with new money. London society looked down on her for not being born into wealth. Her husband Theodore was decent enough, but his brother Byron made Rose's life miserable. Byron thought American women were too forward and kept threatening to have Rose committed to an asylum if she didn't learn proper English manners. Rose was actually pregnant but hadn't told anyone yet, terrified of how Byron might react. The third member was Lavinia Cavendish, a shy young woman convinced she was going mad. Her grandmother had supposedly been insane, and Lavinia's father watched for any signs of similar behavior in his daughter. Lavinia wrote poetry in secret, but her father had found her work and declared it proof of mental instability. The poor girl was terrified of her own emotions. Clara's weekly tea parties gave these women something they'd never had, a place to speak honestly about their lives. Clara was clever about it. She left her diary where Eleanor might find it, letting her read the whole tragic story. Eleanor realized she wasn't alone in her suffering. At Clara's country cottage, the women learned practical skills. Clara taught them to fight with hat pins. She showed Eleanor her poison garden, where plants could heal or kill depending on how you used them. Eleanor paid very close attention to that lesson. Rose was the first to find her courage. When she finally told Theodore about her pregnancy, everything changed. Theodore was overjoyed and furious at his brother's threats. He burned the vulgar guidebook Byron had given him as a test and told his brother to leave Rose alone. Lavinia's breakthrough came through her poetry. Her father called it madness, but Clara was ready for him. She gave Lavinia's mother books by famous male poets like Byron and Shelley. Lavinia's parents not only let her continue writing, but allowed her to court Mr. Wright, a young lawyer who specialized in freeing women from wrongful asylum commitments. But Eleanor's situation got worse. Cecil discovered her night away at Clara's cottage and canceled his Peru trip. He threatened to send William away to school and keep Eleanor locked in the house permanently. Eleanor tried to run with her son. Cecil caught them. Cecil had been planning this. The commitment papers were already signed by Dr. Gimble, Eleanor's own physician, who'd been paid handsomely for his cooperation. Leavenhall Asylum was every bit as horrible as you'd imagine. Cold baths, mind-numbing drugs, constant screams from women who'd been inconvenient to their families. Eleanor managed to last 3 weeks before she got Rose's embroidered boot to that street boy. Clara moved fast once she got the signal. Mr. Wright and his mentor, Mr. Brogan, knew exactly which officials could be bribed or pressured. Within days, they had Eleanor declared sane and released. Eleanor came back hollow-eyed and shaking from the drugs. Clara hid her away while they planned the next move. "I won't leave without William," Eleanor insisted. Clara understood completely. She'd lost George to a cruel man and wouldn't let Eleanor suffer the same fate. "Then we make sure you don't have to," Clara said, handing Eleanor a small vial of nightshade extract. Cecil Clark died choking on dates, expensive imported ones, sent as a gift from an anonymous well-wisher. The doctor called it a terrible accident. Who would have thought such a healthy young man could be struck down by something so ordinary? Eleanor didn't attend the funeral. She was already in Suffolk with William, living quietly in a cottage Clara had arranged. When William asked about his father once, she told him Daddy had gone away. The boy never asked again. Rose gave birth to a healthy daughter that winter. They named the baby Clara Wharton. Lavinia published her first book of poems under her own name. The critics were impressed by her surprisingly mature work for such a young lady. She married Mr. Wright the following spring, and they both threw themselves into helping other women escape wrongful asylum commitments. Clara kept her diary open on her desk, ready for new entries. The secret book society was growing, and there were always more women who needed help. Sometimes Clara thought about George and Elias, about the woman she'd been before the world taught her that survival required careful planning and well-placed poisons. But mostly she thought about Eleanor's letters from Suffolk, about William learning to ride his pony, about little Clara Wharton taking her first steps, about Lavinia's poems appearing in magazines. Some stories Clara had learned were worth fighting for, and some men, well, they got exactly what they deserved.